Tom Bombadil. This is going to be at least a weak defense of Tom Bombadil from the Fellowship of the Ring, from the Lord of the Rings books. Left out of the little P.D. Jackson movie, left out of the '78 rotoscope masterpiece trash fire. Yeah, because he just isn't that relevant. Just isn't that relevant, and that actually somewhat is a little bit the point of Tom Bombadil, as far as I can see. Look, guys, I am not a literary critic. I haven't read Lord of the Rings in probably 10 or 11 years. I haven't seen any of the movies in probably about that long. Going off memory, it's probably a little flawed. Um, but I think that's kind of the point. The book, Frodo and Merry and Pippin are fleeing the Shire, right? They have the ring. They have to get the ring away from the Shire because the whites are coming, and it'll be bad. So they're running for Frodo's life, and they get in some trouble, and this weird fey creature rescues them. It's Tom Bombadil. It's Tom's wife. She has a name. I forget it. There we go. And Tom Bombadil is just this fantastical, funny, Santa Claus, elfish kind of being. He's really there to be wondrous. He doesn't really. He's not all that important to the plot. I mean, he saves the hobbits twice. They get stuck in a tree, whatever. And Tom has power over. His voice just charms everyone that he talks to. He's very charming. That's the point. Tom is charming. And, gets the tree to let go of them. And they get stuck in a barrow, and barrow wights are going to eat their faces or whatever. And he comes and chases them off with the power of his voice, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the Sand People just shows up and makes noise and they run away, and it's cool. It's kind of Deus Ex Machina. It's just like, if you're writing the story and Frodo and Merry and Pippin are running across the countryside, stuff has to happen to them, like a radio serial. They have to get in trouble, and then there has to be a solution to the problem, and that solution just might be this sort of ex machina kind of thing that happens. It's fine. It's not. I mean, in modernity, it's not great. The first movie is already like 3.5 hours long or something, and it doesn't need this additional drama to keep it going. And so Tom Bombadil gets cut. Do we need another charming creature? They really amp up the charmingness of all of the creatures, like the really exaggerated emotions of the hobbit like things that Smeagol used to be, doing the fishing, and just the exaggerated smiling, and it's very saccharine, and it's about the charm of Middle Earth, the bright colors and the clean water and all of that. Yeah, Tom specifically has nothing to do with the ring in the books. He puts the ring on his finger and it does nothing. It doesn't interact with him in any way. It doesn't turn him invisible. It certainly doesn't turn him evil. He doesn't matter to the ring, and the ring doesn't matter to him. And then Frodo puts it on. Tom does some sort of magic-y thing and makes the ring disappear, but then reappear, and gives it to Frodo. And Frodo's suspicious. Is that the same ring? He puts it on. He turns invisible, and the evil pull and whatever, but Tom can totally see straight through it. Tom can see Frodo. He's just not affected by it. He's not affected by it in any way. Later at the Council of Elrond, why not give the ring to Tom Bombadil? Well, Tom is kind of, he's a weirdo, and he has his own priorities, but those priorities are just like drinking clean water and looking around the countryside and talking to the trees. The ring's nothing to him. It's doubtful he could even really maintain an existence outside of this little corner of the Shire anymore, and certainly if he got into Mordor, but probably just what would happen is he'd forget about it. He'd throw it away or forget about it or lose it in a river or something because he doesn't care. It's not to do with him. Right. This all served a purpose. For me, reading the story, this all served a purpose. And the purpose was we're signifying the change of an age. And that's redundant. The whole series is about the changing of ages, right? Specifically, this is the end of the age of men, and a new age will begin. It might also be an age of men, but they might be broken men. They might be servitors of darkness. It might be the beginning of an age of the Dark Lord, orcs, and goblins and trolls. Or it might be the beginning of a new kind of age of men. Where magic is dying, but we're ruled. We rule our passions, and we rule with sort of kindness and honor and fealty. Okay, but that's all about ages of men, and hobbits are not. Hobbits are not men. Hobbits are hobbits, and certainly they're modeled on people. They're modeled on like rural Kentucky kind of area folks. They have their problems and their squabbles and their feuds and so on, but they love the land. They have their own culture, and they like to stay home and like organize their marmalade jars and stuff. And Bilbo Baggins lives in a hole. It's a clean hole, but it is a hole. He's isolated, right? Hobbits are their own being, kind of separate from the world, separate from the problems of the world, insulated, protected. And Tom Bombadil lives in the Shire. He lives in a corner of the Shire. He doesn't venture very far abroad anymore. He just wanders and talks to the rivers and the otters and stuff. He seems to be happy. He is apparently made of good cheer. Nothing really troubles him. And he's fading. He's fading away. Like the time of Tom Bombadil is coming to an end, right? It doesn't come to an end in The Lord of the Rings. By the end, he's just still doing his thing down there in his little corner, talking to otters and shit, but he's not involved, and his time is passing. He's not relevant. He used to be relevant. He had adventures. He was in stories, and now he's exiting the story. This is about the end of the age of hobbits. All right, the age that we're in is explicitly not the age of hobbits. It is the age of men. It's the age of men. But in Hobbiton and in the rest of the Shire, it for sure is 100% the age of the hobbits. They have their lives, and maybe those lives aren't broad in scope, you know? They're very parochial. You marry the girl from your town and settle down and make baby hobbits, and they marry someone from their town and settle down and make baby hobbits, and adventures are scandalous, and the most widely traveled person in the whole Shire has walked like 50 miles until Bilbo decides he's going out into the world to have a scandalous adventure. And that's over. Like by the end of the Lord of the Rings, that age of hobbits is over. Also kind of missing from the film adaptations is Saruman doesn't just fall from the tower and get impaled on a convenient spiky thing and die. Saruman escapes the tower with Wormtongue, Grim of Wormtongue, and they go to the Shire, and they do their program of whispering there and start corrupting the hobbits and setting up a lot of bad enterprises, road gangs, and so on. And so Merry and Pippin come back, and they become sheriffs, and they chase Saruman out of town. They get on their ponies and chase him out of town and mock him and they're the biggest of the hobbits because they drank ant water, and they're tough guys now. They know how to use swords. They kind of whip the place back into shape. That's all missing. That's all missing from the film. And like in the film, um, Sam marries Rosie, the bartender, apparently, and they have babies. And Frodo is sad and heads off to the Grey Havens. Um, but the age of hobbits is over. You can't go home again. You can't go home again because home has changed, and so have you. You can't stand in the same river twice because the river has moved on, and so have you. This is Tom. Tom, at least in my head, signifies this peaceful age of hobbits where all there is to do is wander around and explore, appreciate the color of the wine in the sunset, and think about what otters might be saying to each other, and that innocence is gone. So hobbits, explicitly in the story, hobbits aren't human beings, but they are people, and they are modeled on humans. And maybe something that Tolkien is trying to say is about there's a certain kind of person in the world. And that person can live in a hole. They can isolate. They can know that there are big problems in the world like climate change and war and politics, but that's nothing to do with them. At night, they come home and sit around their table and eat dinner and eat bread, and they're not part of it. They're not part of it. But now everyone's part of it. During World War II, America could no longer sit back on the sidelines and do her own thing. America had to get involved, and all those boys from little country towns in the South and in the mountains and the backwoods of Kentucky, they were aggregated into camps, and the Army trained them to be efficacious killers. It shipped them overseas to places where they didn't speak any of the language, and taught them to shoot men they didn't met for reasons they probably didn't understand, and that innocence was over. They came home and they brought their experiences with them, and that's it. That's it. The Shire is gone now. Yeah. The Tom Bombadil part always made me cry. Do I wish he was in the movie? No, of course not. Again, in the film, he would have been redundant. It does such a wonderful job of jerking those tears from you. It really does convey the sadness, and you can't go home again, without doing it so explicitly. And it's very clear that the age of hobbits is over. By the end, that's very clear, and you don't need to telegraph it so explicitly as Tolkien did when he wrote those novels. Yeah, there you go. So this is the Black Pill, and I don't know why you're still watching this or why you care what I think of Tom Bombadil. But that's what I think of Tom Bombadil. Okay, bye.